Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone, and a very, very warm welcome to this introduction of the Advanced Master in Law and Finance. My name is Rogier Raas. I'm a part-time professor here at Leiden University in Financial Law, and also a proud member of the teaching staff of our Advanced Master program, which we started about 5 years ago. To give you some general information about the program, I gladly refer you to our website, of course. And there's also an introduction video of my colleague Peggy Bracco-Gardner, who is the academic coordinator of our program. And she explains a bit more about the program itself and the sort of courses you will be getting and some practicalities around that. And what I would like to do today is get you acquainted a little bit more of the typical topics that can come up in the course of this program. So what are the kinds of issues we will be talking about if you would decide, which hopefully you will, to join us next year to participate in this program. And although it may sound as a fairly specialized course, law and finance, it actually isn't. If you just simply look at the news of the last couple of days or even the last 24 hours, you immediately see that financial law and financial regulation literally is all around us. Just taking a look at the news outlets of yesterday even, we saw the following happening. You may have seen that, a very, very sharp decline in the prices of Bitcoin and a couple of other cryptocurrencies as a result of discussions around Binance taking over, or not taking over rather, another crypto platform called FTX. You have seen it's about an unprecedented decline of around 15% or so in the value of Bitcoin. And a couple of things that we would be looking at in our program and actually do is what are crypto assets actually? How are they regulated? And I think this example of yesterday also showed that also the crypto market has become a fairly sizable market and could also lead to damage to investors if not regulated properly, or even more systemic risks. So we also look a lot in our program at things like technology, but also the qualification of financial instruments. When is an instrument a regulated financial instrument? How is that regulated? And especially also, what is the response of the European legislator and regulator to these kinds of events? Well, something else going on, very important also for the financial industry in the last couple of days, is obviously the Conference of the Parties of the Climate Change Conference of the United Nations, taking place as we speak in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. Definitely not a regulation that only covers the financial industry, but climate change regulation, and especially the Paris Convention, and in particular the EU response to that, has a very, very profound impact on the financial industry. We'll be spending quite some time on the regulation of sustainability and the role financial institutions play in achieving the objectives of the Paris Agreement and sustainability in general. And I'm going to say a couple of words on that as well later on. Yeah, and then a third example of a very topical situation that has immediate effect also on financial markets and the financial industry is basically all sorts of geopolitical developments, and I only provide 2 examples, but there are of course many, many more. Think about the war in Ukraine or any other geopolitical events, the elections we saw, the midterm elections we saw in the US yesterday. All those kinds of events have an immediate and sometimes profound effect on the financial markets, and therefore also on financial products. So also, if you would join our program, we also spend quite some time on these kinds of developments and try to understand how regulation ensures that the response of the financial markets to these kinds of developments is actually the proper response. So these are just a handful of examples, and there are, again, many, many more to show you how financial law and financial regulation really has a deep impact on our daily lives, not just of financial institutions, but also the real economy and consumers and individuals alike. So what are the recurring themes? What are the topics that you will be spending quite some time on in the courses that are outlined on our websites? Well, one of them is, I already touched upon that, is sustainability. Like I said, there is quite a strong push on the financial industry to make sustainability happen and to make the prevention of climate change happen. Within the EU, it's calculated that about 250 billion euros is necessary each year to ensure that the proper investments are made to prevent further global warming. And that means that is an incredible amount of money. That is not something, that's not a level of investment that governments can put up themselves. So the private sector is definitely needed to make sure that those investments are happening. And if you need investments happening, that's when you need the financial industry, the financial sectors, and the financial markets. So quite a lot of regulation has been designed to ensure exactly that, to make sure that investors, individual investors, but also institutional investors, make the right and conscious decisions when they invest, and if they have a preference to invest in sustainable products, that those sustainable products are there to ensure that this tremendous amount of capital that is needed to ensure those sustainability goals, that capital is actually there, and at the same time preventing situations what we refer to as greenwashing, whereby in the interest of these kinds of objectives, financial institutions or providers of financial products, that they label their products a little bit greener than they actually are, which of course is something that should be prevented, and there's quite a lot of regulation around that to prevent that. And if that regulation proves to be ineffective, litigation will probably and likely be the result of that. And these are all themes we will be discussing in our course. So not just the regulation itself, but also the enforcement of that regulation, whether privately through litigation or publicly through regulators. A very important topic. Of almost equally importance is the digitalization trend. You will no doubt have seen and witnessed yourself that as compared to, let's say, the situation 10 years ago, technology in the financial sector has made a tremendous development. You also you see how easy it is these days to make instant payments at a point of sale or at a web or on a website, but that's only the things that you see. Behind all that, there's even more technological developments to make, for instance, payments happen faster, to make risk assessments easier for banks or insurance companies, or to make transactions in securities faster and even more reliable, so that they actually happen. And so quite a lot of technology. It's a highly technology-driven sector, the financial industry. And one of the things we will be spending some time on in our program is the proposal you see on the screen here, which has been labeled DORA. And DORA is an act, a piece of legislation ensuring so-called digital operational resilience, the Digital Operational Resilience Act, which is an act that solely focuses on digitalization of the financial industry. And to my knowledge, this is the first piece of legislation that really particularly targets a specific sector, the financial industry, and only talks about what digitalization means for that sector and what this particular institution should do to ensure that technology also keeps working, that the risks involved are limited, and more importantly, that at the highest levels of management, and the board of directors and the management board of a financial institution is capable of actually making the right decisions when it comes to decisions around digitalization and IT. And cybersecurity, for instance. Awareness is not enough. Regulators, if this becomes law, are going to expect a deep and thorough knowledge also of highest management on these kinds of issues, and they're also going to be tested on that when they apply for a job. So a very fundamental piece of legislation to ensure that financial institutions can actually survive in this digital day and age of the 21st century. Another common theme that we will be talking about a lot is fairness on the financial markets and in financial products. Fairness is important. Why is fairness important? Because fairness builds trust. And if you build trust as a financial institution or as a financial markets, your customers will keep coming and your investors will put their faith in your market and therefore also on the products that are sold on your market. The flip side of that is that if trust disappears, your investors will disappear. And so for any market, including the EU market, the EU capital market as a whole, it is very, very important and fundamental that that trust is there, and a temporary lack of trust is restored immediately. And like I said, you build trust through fairness, fair transactions, fair costs, fair information about products, but also transparency, that you know what you're getting, that you know what kind of risks you will be exposed to, that when those risks manifest themselves, that you, of course, as an investor don't like that, but at least you knew that those risks could have emerged, which again does not impact trust in the market that much, and sometimes that is being put to the test. An example you'll see on the left top on this screen, you see electronic truck manufacturer Nikola, which was a manufacturer that basically abused that trust they got from investors. They did an initial public offering. They applied for a stock exchange listing in the US, claiming that they had a fully operational electric vehicle, an electric truck that you see on the screen here. But actually, that truck didn't exist yet. It was just the outside, which didn't have a fully operational electric engine in it. When that became public knowledge, investors turned their back on Nikola, and the rest is history. This company no longer disappeared. Same around the events around the acquisition by Elon Musk of Twitter, where there's been quite some news about and some claims that he violated certain aspects of, in this case, US financial law in that takeover bid, which again doesn't help to create and preserve that trust. Another interesting one is the issue you see on the right screen, whereby a fairly little known company called GameStop, which is a chain of computer game stores in the US, suddenly became the arena of investors worldwide trying to keep the stock price at a certain level. And why did they do that? It was because they noticed that quite a couple of institutional investors were actually expecting or gambling on a decline of the stock price of GameStop. And there's a very little picture, fairly small picture here in the middle of the screen. You can't really see the letters, but what you see there is the development of the stock price of GameStop. And you see this little flat line on the left of that graph. For many, many years, actually, the stock price of GameStop did not move at all. And these short-selling investors, institutional investors, they were expecting actually a decline in that stock price, which the fans of this company didn't like, and they mobilized a lot of investors to actually start buying that stock. Not really because of the investment opportunities that provided, but simply because they liked this chain of stores, and they didn't like the short sellers very much. And they were hugely successful, as you can see in this graph. They actually managed to put that price up, and thereby basically frustrating the strategy of the short sellers who were expecting a decline in stock price. And that triggers all sorts of questions, such as, and also legal questions, such as, can you actually do that as an investor? Is this actually a fair movement of the price? Is this proper demand of the price, or would this be viewed as market manipulation, for instance? All sorts of very interesting questions where there's actually not really a very clear-cut answer to, and therefore ideal to be discussing with a group of professionals such as you when we talk about the very heart of financial regulation. And so this is just a very quick and by no means complete overview of the sort of topics you could encounter when you enroll in this program. And as you will see, they're not exclusively limited to, let's say, very detailed principles that only apply to the financial industry. We actually also talk about fairly generic concepts about ethics and fairness and sustainability and digitalization. And as a result of that, we also see that quite a lot of our alumni, of course, end up in the financial sector, either at a financial institution or a legislator, or they become a judge specializing in these kinds of issues, or a lawyer, or in-house counsel at a financial institution. But there's also a fairly sizable group that sooner or later no longer work for a financial institution, but have become very capable and very professional general lawyers, because they have familiarity with a very broad range of concepts. And it also means that you can be equally successful outside the financial sector as inside. So again, just a fairly brief overview. If you have any questions, please do ask them. You can ask them online now, and then we will make sure that I answer them as well as I can on this moment. If later on you have questions, or you are playing back this presentation, please do get in touch with our office with any of the questions you have. I will show you the contact details of the appropriate persons later on in this presentation. But for now, please do ask the questions that you have. Just wanted to, before we turn to your questions, I just wanted to answer a couple of questions that we actually often get when people are deciding whether or not to enroll in our program. One of the questions is, what will my peers be? Which kinds of students will I see in the classroom later on, and how? What would that actually look like? Well, and I think we really pride ourselves in the fact that over the last years, we've always managed to select a very, very interesting group of people and bring them together. And a lot of people have some experience either in the financial industry or at an external law firm, for instance, or they have another master degree which is very relevant for this field of work, and that creates also a very interesting dynamic between the group as a whole, and no doubt you will have a lot of contact with your fellow students and actually be able to learn a lot about financial regulation in Mexico, in China, in India, in Africa, in other EU jurisdictions, in the US and Canada, Australia. So we really bring together financial law specialists or those interested in financial law literally from around the world. So it's not only just us telling us what you should know. No, it's much more than that. It's also bringing together all this experience from around the world, which is actually delivered by you and not by us. So that's also for me. That is a really valuable aspect of this particular course. Well, then a question about career opportunities. Where do our alumni typically end up? I briefly touched upon that already a little bit, and it's the real answer is basically everywhere, literally everywhere. So I think what we specifically train for is a position in the financial industry or on the side of the financial industry. So that means a legal or management job at financial institutions, the traditional banks, insurance companies, investment firms, but also the non-traditional financial institutions, such as payment institutions, or the big tech firms who more and more move into payments because that's a very valuable and interesting industry for them. So that's where our people end up. Or at regulators, or at legislators, whether in individual member states, or at an EU level, or in their respective home countries. External law firms or consultancy firms, that's also where our people, our alumni end up. And like I said, also for those who decide not to become a professional within the financial industry per se, our alumni are very successful also outside that. For instance, as again, external lawyers at law firms, for instance, consultancy firms, or as judges, for instance, EU legislative bodies, etc., etc. It's really, really a very wide scope of opportunities that you have. Also interesting to note is that actually quite a number of our alumni have decided to stay in the Netherlands and managed to land jobs even here in the Netherlands. So that shows that not only the program is a good basis to find a job, but also apparently that they've enjoyed their time in Leiden and the Netherlands so much that they've actually decided to stay here and pursue a career here. Quite a number of people actually have done that, and no doubt you will meet them at one of our alumni events, on which you will also be warmly invited if you would join our program. Then maybe a little bit about our teaching methods, and I think in the introduction video there's a lot more information on that, on how we teach and what the individual teaching methods are of the individual courses. But generally, it's fair to say that we have a limited number of places available for this program, and that's been a very deliberate choice. We firmly believe that if you have a relatively small group of, let's say, maximum 20, 25 students, then you can have really the meaningful debates about the topics we just talked about. And then it's not just us telling you what you should know, but then also in discussions, in presentations between yourselves, of course, moderated by us, that's when you really grasp the essence of financial law and finance-related topics. So that means you work in small groups. It's a very interactive program. You will meet and become familiar with all of your teachers. They will also know you and be able to tailor the program a little bit to your background, and also make sure that your background is also becoming a valuable tool for everyone else to know. The fact that we managed to land students from interesting backgrounds, that by no means means that you have to be a specialist before you join. That is certainly not what we're looking for. What we are looking for, and what is a key success factor for this program, is that you enjoy the sort of topics that we will be talking about, and that you have some form of specific interest in financial regulation and the financial industry. That's really what counts, and often that goes hand in hand with some kind of experience, but that experience is not necessary. It's often there, but it's not necessary, even if you have had a career so far in a very different field of the law, and you just bring a healthy interest in the topics that we will be talking about. That really is enough, and also very valuable for you to be successful in our program. We also do quite a number of extracurricular activities, COVID permitting. A part of the program is also a trip to one of the other EU member states to really see financial law in action, where we visit some financial institutions or a regulatory body, depending on the country or city where we will be in. And it's also a perfect opportunity for you to know each other, get to know each other a bit better and a bit differently, and of course also the teaching staff who would also be joining. So that's just a sort of a general introduction. Let me just check for a moment whether there are any additional questions, or whether I've already covered most of the questions that you may have. Okay, so one question from Sebastian, an economics student. I've taken 3 law courses as a dedicated minor, with 2 more upcoming law courses. Would it be sufficient for me to apply for this program? That's a good question. I think it is, but if you want to have a clear answer on that, I would recommend you to get in touch with our office, and the contact details will appear later on. I mean, definitely, as a general remark, if you're an economics student with some familiarity with law courses, it is actually sort of the exact profile that we would be looking for. And like I mentioned, what kind of students are, or what kind of background should you have to be successful in this program? At least if you've done an economics minor or an economics master, plus some law minors, then at least you know what kind of topics we will be discussing in it. So if you were interested in that, that's a good predictor that you will like our program. Whether it formally satisfies the test, I suggest you get in touch with our office. But it's definitely the kind of students we would be looking for. So just checking whether there are any other questions, and if not, then that is fine. And then I thank you very much for your attention today. I definitely hope to see you again soon. Please also take the freedom to contact one of our students. You see on the screen the names of two of our current students, which we actually call them student ambassadors, because like many of our students, they're really having a very good time in Leiden and in our program, and they're actually available. They've made themselves available, and we appreciate that very much, to answer your questions, also from a student perspective. So go to this website, and then you can actually get in touch with them, and please do if you want to verify what I've just actually told you. And then there is also... is there another question, or...
Yes, it's not coming on the screen. Shall I read it out loud?
No, I don't.
Is it possible to pursue this master's part-time or while working or doing an internship?
One more question just came in, and that's a question about whether it's also possible to do this master part-time instead of full-time. That is a possibility. You can do this master program in 2 years instead of 1. So yes, that is certainly doable. One thing to bear in mind, of course, is that the classes are mandatory to attend, and they're during the day. So part-time does mean that you have to, of course, have to check for yourself whether you can make yourself available for the classes in that program. But it's basically, part-time means that the course load is being cut in half and spread over 2 years. And we actually have quite a number of students who do this program part-time and feel it's good to combine with, for instance, a daytime job. So yes, that is a possibility. Well, here on the screen you see also our the contact details of our admissions office and of Ms. Kalsbeek, who is our program coordinator. Please do not get in touch, or do not hesitate to get in touch with her with any questions you have about the program, about the admission process, and everything else you want to talk about. We are there to help, and I definitely hope to see you very soon in Leiden at some point. Thank you for your attention, and goodbye.